Welcome to this explainer. We hit the buy button all the time without a second thought, right? But the actual mechanics behind online retail are absolutely fascinating. It's this complex, constantly shifting battleground. Today, we're going to evaluate the actual financial and strategic health of digital firms. We'll separate the massive hype from the economic reality and figure out what actually makes an online business viable in today's incredibly cutthroat market. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to do a quick e-commerce reality check, assess firm economic viability, break down the 4 retail archetypes, tackle retail channel conflicts, and wrap up with a massive online service economy. Let's get right into it.
Part 1. The e-commerce reality check. To understand exactly where we are today, we really have to shatter the early utopian myths of e-commerce. Back in the 1990s, the early internet pioneers honestly predicted that physical retail would be, as they put it, blown to bits. They assumed that because the internet brought down search and transaction costs, we'd all just rationally flock to the absolute lowest prices online. They genuinely believed traditional middlemen would be totally wiped out, a concept called disintermediation. But fast forward to the 2020s reality? E-commerce is obviously huge and competitive, but it still only captures around 15% of total retail sales in the US. Crazy, right? Instead of getting rid of middlemen, we got hypermediation, the birth of massive new intermediaries like Amazon and Shopify. And physical stores didn't die. Instead, we're seeing the absolute dominance of omni-channel retail, where having a physical store is actually a massive asset.
Moving on to Part 2, Assessing Firm Economic Viability.
Okay, so since that early utopian vision was so remarkably off base, how do we actually perform a health checkup on a firm today? How do we know if an online retailer is actually going to survive? Well, it comes down to a clear divide. On one hand, you have strategic factors. This is the big picture stuff, right? What are their core competencies? Do they have high barriers to entry? Are there synergies with other businesses? And is their technology truly scalable? But, strategy alone doesn't keep the lights on. On the flip side, we have the strict financial factors. You have to open up the hood and look at their balance sheet, their working capital, gross margin, and operating margin. Because honestly, you can have the most beautiful, user-friendly website in the world, but if your financial factors are a mess, your digital business is totally on a ticking clock. Which brings us to the absolute bottom line, net margin. This is the percentage of sales revenue a firm actually retains after every single expense is deducted. A negative net margin means you're bleeding money on every single sale. In the early days, companies thought they could just price products below cost to acquire users and then, figure out the whole profit thing later. It was a deadly strategy. Today, it's pretty simple. If your net margin is negative, you aren't really a sustainable business. You're just a highly efficient machine for burning through investor cash.
Part 3. The 4 retail archetypes.
So, this economic reality creates a market that basically shakes out into 4 distinct characters. Not all e-commerce firms are built the same, and they each have their own unique survival traits. Virtual merchants are actually leading the pack, capturing 47% of online retail sales. They're followed pretty closely by omnichannel merchants at 32%. Then we've got manufacturer direct taking up a solid 18%, and finally, the legacy catalog merchants holding on to a 3% slice. Let's break down exactly what makes each of these archetypes tick. First up, virtual merchants. Think Amazon or Wayfair. These are your pure-play digital firms. They bear absolutely zero physical store costs, which sounds amazing, right? But the downside is huge. Because they don't have a physical presence you drive past every day to remind you they exist, they face a really steep learning curve and massive customer acquisition expenses to build a brand completely from scratch. And because retail generally operates on razor-thin margins, virtual merchants have to develop incredibly efficient fulfillment and supply chain operations just to eke out a profit. It's a total high-wire act. Then we've got the omni-channel merchants, also known as the bricks and clicks guys. We're talking giants like Walmart or Target. They rely on their massive physical footprints and super-established brand names. This gives them a huge advantage when it comes to customer acquisition. You already know exactly who they are. It also lets them offer seamless experiences, like buying online and picking it up in-store. Their biggest headache? The immense, mind-boggling complexity of coordinating pricing, inventory, and logistics across literally thousands of physical stores and a massive digital platform, all at the exact same time.
Archetype number 3 is manufacturer direct, or direct-to-consumer, D2C. Think of Apple or digitally native brands like Warby Parker. By cutting out the retail middlemen entirely, they get to keep a much higher margin of the sale
And they get complete control over their brand experience. But it's definitely not perfectly smooth sailing. They have to build their own fast response fulfillment systems. And if they already have traditional retail partners, they have to tread incredibly carefully so they don't completely destroy those foundational relationships.
And bringing up the rear, we have catalog merchants, like LL Bean or Land's End. Now here's a surprisingly fun fact. These companies actually had a massive head start in e-commerce. Way before the internet, they already had the robust fulfillment infrastructure, massive warehouses, and dense customer databases needed to ship stuff directly to people's homes. Their main hurdle today has just been rapidly adapting those amazing legacy assets to a digital environment to offset the absolutely exorbitant costs of printing and mailing physical catalogs.
All right, Part 4. Overcoming Retail Channel Conflicts.
Now that DTC model we just talked about, it actually creates a specific operational nightmare for those manufacturers: channel conflict. This happens when a manufacturer starts selling directly to the public online, meaning they are suddenly competing on price against their very own retail partners. Retailers absolutely hate this. But to even make this shift, manufacturers face a massive internal hurdle. Traditionally, they use a supply push model. They guess the demand, build a huge batch of products, push them to a warehouse, and cross their fingers that retailers sell them. But to succeed online directly, they usually have to painfully transition to a demand pull model. This means products aren't actually manufactured or assembled until a specific customer order comes in. It requires a crazy agile supply chain, and honestly, a lot of traditional manufacturers just lack the infrastructure to pull it off without stumbling.
Finally, Part 5. The Online Service Economy.
Okay, we've talked a lot about physical stuff, but we have to pivot to how this digital evolution is fundamentally transforming the service sector. Just look at this number, 80%. That is roughly the percentage of the entire United States gross domestic product that is generated by the service sector alone. We're talking everything from finance and travel to job recruitment and medical advice. Now, delivering these highly regulated hands-on services online is vastly different from mailing out a pair of shoes. The value isn't a physical object, it's about collecting, storing, and exchanging information. And because this sector is just so massive, the financial incentive to digitize it is absolutely staggering.
Which naturally leads us to the explosive world of on-demand service platforms. Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, you know them. These platforms act as brilliant digital matchmakers. They don't actually own the cars or cook the food. Instead, they pair spare resources, like an empty car seat and a driver's free time, with an immediate real-time consumer need. They rely heavily on a gig economy workforce, and the platform simply collects a nice little transaction fee for making the introduction. It's a highly scalable model, but hey, as anyone who has tried to hail a ride during a sudden rainstorm knows, it's incredibly sensitive to real-time changes in supply, demand, and labor regulations.
So, we've covered a ton of ground here today, from the ashes of those 90s dot-com myths to the rise of omni-channel dominance and the gig economy. Given the razor-thin margins and high acquisition costs of the pure virtual merchants, contrasted with the massive physical assets but super complex logistics of the omni-channel giants, I'll leave you with this to reflect on. As technology like AI and predictive marketing continues to evolve, which of these business archetypes truly holds the ultimate blueprint for the future? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the mechanics of the digital world around you.